Are you ready to elevate your fantasy team? Here is Joey the Tooth with your IDP update. If it's not IDP, it's not fantasy football.
All right, welcome back to the IDP update, everybody. This is episode 3, and luckily enough, we actually had some football to cover this week. Week 1 happened. We had the Thursday night games. We had Sunday, Mondays tonight. Man, it was pretty eventful. There were some injuries that happened. We'll get into that. Some players really stepped up. Guys you wouldn't even expect. Some that you would, but other guys you may not have. Some of your studs showed out. Some of your studs fell flat. We're going to talk about all of this. I'm going to hit up on the waivers this week. I think that's a big thing after week 1. You want to find all those guys that you can dig out of the pool before everybody else jumps on. Going to cover some of the injuries, as many as I could find. Some of the biggest name ones. They're heartbreakers, but I don't know. Overall, it was a pretty weird week for IDP. I mean, some strange guys scoring. A lot of good cornerback play, which was strange. High tackle numbers for corners. But, hey, IDP is IDP. We'll take it any way it comes. We'll get into it in just a second. First, I want to say thank you all for being patient off season. Like I said, I've got my baby and I've got my wife, and they come first for me always. And I've had such a great time watching my child grow up. So before we dive too deep into the IDP, let me just take a quick break, and then we'll jump right into the injury report. Okay. We're going to look at the injury report now. Some of the key injuries to take away from week 1. First off, we'll start with Vinnie Curry of the Philadelphia Eagles, defensive end. He suffered a hamstring injury, and it doesn't seem to be too severe. It's not like a hamstring tear or anything. It looks like just a strain, but he is supposed to be out at least 4 weeks. So if you're looking for somebody to add, I'll talk about him more in depth in a minute. But Josh Sweet, he's been kind of a guy waiting in the background for Vinnie Curry and Brandon Graham to move on, but this could be his time. Kenny Clark, he couldn't finish the second half for Green Bay. Defensive tackle. Kenny Clark is one of your premier defensive tackles in IDP, and he went down with a groin injury, but the extent of the injury is not yet known. So he's definitely a situation you want to monitor. Keep your eyes out on Kenny Clark. The biggest one, I think, of the weekend, Leighton Vander Esch. Gosh, so much promise. The guy has so much promise, but he's starting to get that injury-prone tag, and guess what, folks? He's going to miss the season again. He had fractured his collarbone in week 1. And he will not be back for the season. That is very unfortunate. But, hey, it is what it is. There's one of your studs gone already. Blake Cashman. Blake Cashman was a guy we all kind of expected to come in and play next to Neville Hewitt and play big snaps. You didn't really hear too much about him getting injured during the game, but he definitely did. And that was the main reason for his disappearance. It was also a groin injury, but the extent is not yet known. So it's another one you want to monitor week to week, because we don't know what's going on with Avery Williamson yet. Neville Hewitt seems to be a mainstay, but Avery Williamson couldn't play week 1, so we'll see what happens week 2. But there's a good possibility Cashman may be out. Nick Kwiatkowski for the Las Vegas Raiders. Still weird saying Las Vegas Raiders. But Nick Kwiatkowski, he had a pec injury and he couldn't finish the game. But looks like the Raiders are feeling optimistic about his availability for next week. So another one to monitor, but it sounds optimistic in his case. 2 big ones that could be devastating to the Buffalo Bills is in the middle of their defense. Tremaine Edmonds left with a shoulder injury and couldn't come back. I mean, he's still questionable. it doesn't, the extent, again, it's too early to tell, but that hurts. And Matt Milano also left, hamstring injury. It still doesn't say if it's strain, tear, how bad it is, but he also couldn't finish the game. So here's your two top tacklers from 2019 and one of the best linebacker duos, and they're both gone week 1, and their status is up in the air for week 2. That could be devastating for the Bills. I mean, luckily they play in now one of the easiest divisions, but still, that's hard for any defense to overcome. Drew Tranquill, promising Drew Tranquill. Almost goes in, makes or misses a tackle, or actually made the tackle, but came down with an ankle injury, and it looks like a broken ankle. It's not verified yet, but the word on the street is he's also out for the season. So anybody who had high hopes for Tranquill, Zach Magley, I'm sorry, man, you had your breakout piece, but you can't predict injury, and it just happens. So this one is kind of fun for me because if you follow me on Twitter, you saw that I was pumping Andrew Wingard once Ronnie Harrison was traded. And boy, was I way off on that because Josh Jones came in, and Josh Jones played well. Josh Jones played strong safety, and he played pretty good. Gerard Wilson was injured during week 1, though, and then Wingard came in. And Wingard did come up with an interception, so I'm still going to say Wingard was a good pickup, even though I was way off on why. But Wilson was put on IR. IR to return, I believe, so it may not be lost for the season, but Wingard is still a good pickup. So those were most of the key injuries that I could come up with after week 1. If I missed any, I apologize, but those are the big ones. Most seem to be just something you need to monitor. But some big ones, Van Der Esch out, Tranquill out, and then the middle of that Buffalo D could be scary. Let's look at some of the guys who performed up to not how they were supposed to, but let's look at the top performers of the week. Jerome Baker. Jerome Baker had himself a game. 13 solo tackles, 3 assisted tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, 1 sack, and a forced fumble. 16 total tackles, a sack, and a forced fumble. That's a huge, huge game. And he's actually a guy who I thought was going to regress a bit. I thought that Miami was going to play a little bit more of a New England-style offense, and I figured he would be the highest snap guy, but I figured his tackle numbers would drop a little bit. But was I wrong? Because he had himself a game. Marcus May filling in for Jamal Adams, and boy, did he ever. Marcus May, let's see, he finished with 10 total tackles, 7 of them solo, 2 tackles for a loss, 2 sacks, 2 passes defended, and a forced fumble. That's a huge, huge, huge game, and it looks like he's going to fill right in and do that Jamal Adams role. So those are probably the 2 top performers of the week, Baker and Marcus May. And, speaking of Jamal Adams, he had himself a game as well, 12 total tackles himself. And he had 8 solo, 2 for a loss, and he also got a sack. So it looks like anybody who said that Jamal Adams going to that what was it, a cover 3 scheme that Seattle likes to play, they thought his numbers would drop. They thought it's not a great scheme fit for IDP. They were wrong. Jamal Adams is Jamal Adams, and he's going to do what he does, and that's everything well. Speaking about doing what he does, another guy I was kind of off on, Budda Baker. I had Budda Baker. I still have him ranked as my number 5 safety, but he's number 5. Most people have him right around 2 or 3. I figured his tackle numbers would regress after the additions of Isaiah Simmons and Devondre Campbell. And the fact that he doesn't really do much else for IDP, I figured he would drop a bit, but his tackle numbers didn't dip. He had 15 tackles, 10 solo. So double-digit solo tackles, 15 total tackles. That's insane from a safety. So Budda Baker, thumbs up to you. Sorry I dropped you a little bit, but it's week 1. We're going to keep going with that. Jonathan Abram, his first full game as an NFL pro, and he looks legitimate. He had himself 13 total tackles, 9 solo, and a tackle for a loss, and he was the heart and soul, really, of that defense for the Raiders. I mean, it wasn't great. It wasn't a great showing. I mean, they gave it, 31 points, but he played very good. He was very good in the back end in a time where Kwiatkowski couldn't finish and Littleton didn't have much else help. So that's a promising look for the Raiders. It's nice to see them have some really big-time players after Crosby last year. Rookie Patrick Queen, he had a great first game. He's a guy who I was a little worried about going into the NFL just because of his play strength, but you didn't see any of it on Sunday. He finished with 8 total tackles, 4 solo, tackle for a loss, a sack, and a forced fumble. He was a really active inside linebacker. I mean, Queen, go Queen. He's always drafted too high for me to grab. I think I have him in one league, but he looks like he can fit the bill. Now, 2 guys who kind of who are always good, but kind of fly under the radar. First one at defensive tackle, he really kind of plays defensive end, but Christian Wilkins, he had 5 solo tackles, 1 assist, so 6 total tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, a sack, and 2 passes defended. That's coming from a defensive tackle. If you can get those numbers, if you play in leagues that start defensive tackles, Christian Wilkins can be a absolute stud this year. So if he's available, make sure you go get him. And then lonely old Trey Flowers. Trey Flowers is kind of that guy that's always overlooked. He goes like in the DL, probably close to 15-20s, and he always ends up near top 12. And he showed it again this weekend. He had 6 total tackles, 5 solo, 1 tackle for a loss, a sack, and a forced fumble. He's one of the better tackling and edge-setting defensive ends, and he seems to be getting more aggressive with his tackle numbers. I mean, his sack numbers. He finished strong last season. He's starting real strong this season, and I think the Lions are really hoping that he can step into that role and be a double-digit sack guy. So those were some of the top performers from week 1, and there were quite a few guys who were your studs who I'm going to say flopped miserably week 1. I'm going to give you the freak out meter too. First, let's start with Josh Allen, defensive end of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm a big fan of his. He's my number 6 overall ranked defensive end. He finished the game with 2 total tackles, only 1 of them solo. That's it. I'm not going to worry about him quite yet. I mean, the Jaguars defense as a team played very well. They played against one of the best offensive lines in football against the Indianapolis Colts, and that offensive line is unbelievable. Even when you have an immobile quarterback like Phillip Rivers, they still couldn't get to him. So my panic meter for Josh Allen is 0. I'm starting him again next week, as I will, because I have him in many, many, many leagues. So I'm not worried about him one bit. Then there was Yannick and Gakue. He was just recently traded to the Minnesota Vikings to pair up with Danielle Hunter, who before week 1 went on IR with the ability to return. So now that leaves Ngakwe as the number 1 defensive end on the team, paired up with Ifedi Odenigbo. Ngakwe was probably a top 15, top 20 defensive end, and then Hunter goes out, and they probably make him a top 12, top 15. He did literally nothing. 0 stats. That is incredibly tough, and that's not a good look for your first game with your new team. It really makes him wonder, was it worth it? Panic meter. So Ngakwe, he's a big play guy. So he's the guy that's going to get you forced fumbles and he's going to get you sacks. He's not going to get you a ton of tackles. He's not your big tackle defensive end. So I'm not going to worry quite yet. because he could easily come back next week and make a huge splash. So panic meter, maybe 20 out of 100. I'm not quite worried. And I think when Hunter comes back, it'll be even better for Ngakwe. Taylor Rapp. He disappeared. He had one solo tackle, one assisted tackle. Jordan Fuller ended up playing over 70% of the team snaps, and Rapp was nowhere to be seen for most of the game. He was playing on special teams. Now, I know in the offseason he was dealing with a knee injury, and he may be slow to come back, and he may be behind a little bit, but it still leaves me worried. Like my worry meter for Rapp, especially with how well Fuller played, is probably that 70% range, 70 out of 100. I don't know. I love Taylor Rapp. He was in my top 15 safeties, but I don't know. That's not a good look. I'm worried, and I need to see what happens week 2, see if he gets acclimated more into the defense. Javon Kenlaw, he's a rookie. He's filling in for the recently traded DeForest Buckner. Looked nothing like DeForest Buckner. He had one assisted tackle the entire game while DJ Jones stole the show, but that's okay. First game, he's a rookie. He's on a stacked defensive line. My worry with him, 10%. That's not that high. I'm going to keep. He's probably more of a bench stash guy anyway until he produces, but I'm not all that worried about him. We talked about Max Crosby a lot recently. Even earlier when I was talking about Abram, he's a nice addition to a defense with already Max Crosby, but Crosby disappeared week 1. He had 2 assisted tackles all game. That was it. There's some people, like my good friend Mike Woolert. He is one who may think that Max Crosby was a one-hit wonder, and he's going to fall off quite a bit this year. I have him ranked as my number 10 defensive end, and I have him in a lot of leagues. So I hope, Mike, Smooth Jazz, I hope you're wrong. But Crosby definitely didn't show up week 1. Demarcus Lawrence, another guy I was hoping for a bounce back. He didn't show up either. He had one solo tackle and a pass deflection. Granted, the entire defense outside of one man, who we'll talk later, didn't look great. Plus, they lost Leighton Vander Esch. I don't know. Lawrence just didn't seem to be able to get the pressure, and it's not a great offensive line with the Rams. So I'm wondering what's going to go on with the Cowboys this year. They lost their first game. I think it's a game they should have won. I mean, that team is, especially on the offensive side of the football, is pretty stacked. So I don't know. Put up 17 points. Not a good look for the Cowboys. Defensive tackle who had one great year, one pretty good year, and then a year that was bothered by injury and suspension, Jaron Reid. He's right there. He's on that cusp of being a really good defensive tackle, and he had that great season, but he's just hasn't shown up in the past year in one game. So Sunday he had one tackle, one assist. I mean, a lot of these guys just one tackle, one assist. He's a heavy snap guy, and he's in the center of that defense. You expect more out of it, but he didn't get anything done. Adrian Amos, a guy who's supposed to be playing strong safety for the Packers. He didn't show up either. Same deal. One tackle, and one solo, and one assisted tackle. I kind of had him. He's a guy who you were getting back in like the DB 40 range. And he's a guy who gets 80 tackles. He's not going to get to 80 tackles looking like this, but he flopped week 1. There's a lot of talk about TJ Edwards being a sleeper this year, getting a starting role with Philly in the middle of the defense. He didn't do much. Nope, it was a Nate Jerry show in Philly. TJ Edwards, one solo tackle and one assisted tackle. I'm wondering if his lack of athleticism is gonna show up. I'm a little worried about him. With guys like Devian Taylor waiting in the midst, and Sean Bradley, I think if Edwards doesn't show up in the next week or two, they might get a shot. So I'm gonna say Edwards is like my worry probably around the same as Rapp, 70%. And then, man with a big extension, Myles Garrett. 1 solo tackle, 1 for a loss, and a fumble recovery. I mean, he's there. He was there in the defense. Just couldn't quite make his presence felt. I'm not worried about him, though. He's a weekly starter. 0% worry. He just flopped week 1. Now, let's get into the waiver wire. Probably my favorite thing in fantasy football. This is where you find your gems, your league winners, guys who just can produce that you have no idea actually would. I'm going to cover a couple of guys I already talked in my studs part. Christian Wilkins, I already talked about him. If he's available, he's probably available. I mean, in a lot of leagues, he's listed as defensive tackle. So he's been scooped up by some people who remember him from his Clemson days. He didn't have a great rookie year last year. Not a bad year, but it wasn't huge for IDP. But he played on 67% of the team's snaps, came up with 6 total tackles, 2 for a loss, a sack, and 2 passes defended. So if you can get even half that production every week from a defensive tackle, you're in good shape. Also, we already talked about Marcus May. You heard the game he had. That's huge. Go scoop him up, especially if he's going to continue to play that Jamal Adams role pretty much like Jamal Adams. I mean, it's seamless. They're really hurt at linebacker too, so he could be playing in the box a lot more. So go ahead and grab Marcus May. He played every single snap, 100% of snaps. I'm going to stick with the Jets because I kind of like the Jets defense for IDP just because they're on the field so much. So another guy who played 100% of snaps, Neville Hewitt. He seems to be the guy to own in the middle of that Jets linebacker group. He played every snap. He didn't have a huge game, but he had 8 total tackles, even though only 3 solo, and he had a pass defended. But he's going to be that guy. He played every single snap. So if you are looking for the linebacker to own in New York, for the Jets at least, it's Neville Hewitt. So if he's available, you could do much worse than starting him weekly. And then still with the Jets, Brian Poole. Brian Poole played slot corner. He played the nickel. He had a huge game. He played all but 1 snap, 99% of snaps. He had 9 tackles, 8 solo, 1 tackle for a loss. He got a sack, and he had a pass defended. So with the shortness of the linebacker group, just a weak linebacker group, guys like Marcus May and Brian Poole will be asked to blitz a little bit more. Just throw a couple of different looks that way, and he could be a guy kind of like Kenny Moore. He just used the blitz a lot more. He could easily have 3 or 4 sacks this year from the corner slot. So maybe it looks like they're going to use him like Tennessee used Logan Ryan last year. So kind of like a safety role playing the nickel. So if Brian Poole's probably available, you can play. If you have a league that plays DB, you don't even need to have a cornerback specialty. He's still worth it. I mean, 9 tackles and a sack. That'll get it done every week. All right, staying in the AFC East, we're going to go with Brandon Jones, rookie Brandon Jones, safety out of Miami with the Dolphins. I was kind of big on Eric Rowe this year, and he played more snaps. I think he played 84% of the snaps, but he didn't produce that much. It was Brandon Jones. He came in and played 53% of the team's snaps, and he came up with 10 tackles. He had 7 solo, 3 assisted tackles. So if Rowe doesn't get it done, I could easily see Brandon Jones push him for time, and they may even move Rowe back to corner. So Brandon Jones is a guy to keep your eye on, and you may want to jump in and grab him before anybody else does. If he wasn't drafted in the rookie draft, go ahead and get Brandon Jones. Let's go with it's kind of like a tugs at my heartstrings here. Alden Smith, man, I miss the guy. He had such a great start to the career with the 49ers. Lost his mind for a while. It was absolutely insane what happened to him. His career took a strange path, but he's been missing for a few years now, and he just came back, signed with the Cowboys, was reinstated, and in his first game back, he played 74% of snaps, had 11 tackles, 6 solo, a tackle for a loss, and a sack. I mean, that looks like the Alden Smith of old. And you watch him, he was diagnosing plays so well. He used his long wingspan to wrap people up. He was able to make the call on any options ran. I mean, he was just there. He was there for everything. Now with Leighton Vander Esch out, I mean, Smith's probably going to play even more because he kind of plays that hybrid linebacker defensive end role that the Cowboys are messing around with. And he's probably going to be his snap shares especially after this game is probably going to increase. He's listed as a defensive end most places or with dual designation. So Alden Smith may be a top priority ad this week, which is strange to say because it's been so long, but go for it. Chauncey Gardner Jones, safety for the New Orleans Saints. He had a big game. He played on 87% of the team's snaps. He had 10 tackles and a pass defended. He had 9 solo tackles. A lot of people thought Jenkins was going to be the guy who was all over the field making tackles because that's Malcolm Jenkins. That's what he does. But it was Gardner Jones who was the one that was there in pretty much every play you saw, and he was making plays. He was making tackles. He was shooting gaps. He was all over the place. So grab Chauncey Gardner Jones. He's a nice safety addition. The guy I talked about earlier when I was talking to Vinnie Curry's injury, Josh Sweet. So Vinnie Curry went down. Brandon Graham's 31 now, I think. Sweet could be a nice dynasty asset moving forward. I mean, last year he had 4 sacks, and he played probably 20-30% of the team's snaps. He came in, filled in for Vinnie Curry when he left this week. He had 3 tackles, 2 solo, a sack, and a forced fumble. So, I mean, he's showing when he gets the opportunity, he makes plays. So with Vinnie Curry out, it's going to be Sweet stepping into this role. So he may be a guy you want to go ahead and grab, and he could even take Graham or Curry's job moving forward, especially after this year, because he's still young. Let's keep it with the Eagles. I got a couple of Eagles to talk about. A guy I've been talking about a lot this offseason, I have him kind of pegged as a sleeper/breakout candidate, Nate Jerry. He played very well last year. He had played in all 16 games. I think he started 7. He had 86 tackles last year, and he's the linebacker to own undoubtedly in Philly. His first game, he had 10 tackles, 5 solo, 5 assisted, and 2 tackles for a loss. So obviously he's the guy to own. I mean, TJ Edwards didn't do much. Duke Riley had a pretty good game, but it was because he came up with, I believe he had a sack. So Nate Jerry is guy. He's going to be your tackle guy. He's getting into the backfield. He's good in coverage. So if he's available, he played 99% of the team snaps. So Nate Jerry, I've been talking him up, and he's starting to show out. A guy I gave somebody a little bit of advice on this week was to start Rodney McLeod, safety for the Eagles. Who's supposed to start next to him was a little murky. Is it going to be the rookie, or is it going to be Jalen Mills? It was Mills, of course. But it was McLeod is the safety to own. Like everybody said, Mills is going to play that Jenkins role. McLeod is already a lot like Jenkins. He's a good tackling safety. He just played free safety next to Jenkins. So they have that weak linebacker group, and McLeod came in and he had 8 tackles, 6 solo, and he came up with pass deflection. So Rodney McLeod, he is a good safety ad, especially with how weak that linebacker group is. So those are my Eagles. Let's see, who else do we have? Takkarist McKinley. Can he reach his potential now? I mean, he's got his best running mate he's ever had. I mean, Vic Beasley had one good year. Other than that, he had flashes, but he more than often did not show up. They grabbed Dante Fowler Jr. this offseason. He had 4 tackles and half a sack his first game, but it was McKinley who showed out. He had 5 tackles, 2 solo, tackle for a loss, a sack, and a pass deflection. That's a good game from a DN, and he played 69% of the team's snaps. So he's in there more often than not. So he's a base down guy. And they haven't given up on him yet. I don't think they picked up his option, but which means he's in a contract year. So McKinley if he's going to be trying his butt off to just show out all his potential this year. So he may be a guy you want to monitor for one more week, or he may be a guy you want to grab now before anybody else does. And then the last guy I want to talk about a little bit is from Jacksonville, who came up with a big win against Indy this weekend. Rookie CJ Henderson, cornerback. He played 84% of the team's snaps. He had 5 tackles, all solo, 3 pass deflections, and an interception. So CJ Henderson showed he has lockdown potential. He's a rookie, so he does get targeted often, and he's probably the number 1 corner on Jacksonville, so he's going to cover all the top options. So he will be thrown at, and he has shown good lockdown production. So if you have cornerback options, even if not, he could fill a DB role, but I don't think he'll get super high tackle numbers. So I'm more or less saying pick up CJ Henderson if you have cornerback leagues. So those are my top waiver wire additions for the week. Pay attention this week, man. Week 2, keep going, keep starting your studs. Don't go crazy yet. Week 1 was weird. It was weird. Just go in next week and keep starting the guys you drafted and pick up some of these guys if you need to. But I don't know. You still want to start your studs week 2. There's guys that you can grab, but I'm not saying go ahead and grab McKinley and start him over Myles Garrett because he had a terrible week 1. You're still going to start Garrett, but you may want to grab McKinley just to see how he does for the rest of the year. So that's the week 1 edition of the IDP update. You can find all my written content on dynastyfootballdigest.com and idpguys.org. Make sure you subscribe to the dynastytradecalculator.com that we use our ADP input for IDP, and created the first IDP and offense trade calculator with the Dynasty Trade Calculator. Make sure you subscribe to the Rider Digest Network and the Big 3 Network. They've teamed together to help produce this show with us, the IDP update. There's plenty of other great pods on both of those networks, so make sure you follow those guys. Subscribe to IDP guys and Dynasty Football Digest. We have tons of tools, including matchup charts every week for IDP. We have ADP, we have rankings, we have weekly content, including waivers, injury reports, defensive line matchups, stock market. We have a stacked team at IDP guys and Dynasty Football Digest, and we just keep on growing. We have a new tool probably for next year, but it's going to include player projections, and it's going to be catering to every single IDP scoring. So this is something that I've been big on. Everybody wants to they want to create a new standard for IDP scoring, and I've been an advocate saying we already have it, because when you open a league in any of these sites, you already have your standard tackle heavy scoring. So I'm going to create a page on idpguys.org, and it's going to list off my top scoring settings. And next year we will have a tool where you take whatever scoring setting you use, input it into the tool, and our rankings adjust accordingly. So be ready for that, because that is going to be groundbreaking. So I want to thank you guys very much, and tune in next week for week 2. All right.
This has been a collaboration between the Big 3 Network and the Rider Digest Network. Follow at Big 3 Network on Twitter to find more great audio podcasts, and subscribe to the Rider Digest Network on YouTube for tons of league-winning fantasy football video shows.